Operation Epic Fury enters its third week as U.S. and Israeli forces continue attacking Iran. U.S. Central Command released a new video today showing strikes against Iranian military targets. While President Trump tells NBC News that he wants to make a deal with Iran to end the war, but he doesn't like the terms he sees yet. The president also called for an international coalition to send warships to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a move that UN Ambassador Mike Waltz spoke in support of earlier today.
It's absolutely correct for President Trump to call on the world to come help make sure their energy supplies are secure. He's had enough with the Iranian regime holding the world hostage in so many ways, either with its missiles, with the straits, with, God forbid, with a nuclear weapon. And he's calling upon the world to take care of this problem once and for all.
Down in West Palm Beach, we have Dana Marie McNichol. She's live. What do you got, Dana Marie?
Hey, Joey. Well, we're seeing some conflicting messages here. As you mentioned, the president has said Iran is ready to talk, but just this morning, Iran's foreign minister has disputed those claims. Take a listen.
No, we never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes, and this is what we have done so far.
As Iran continues to use the Strait of Hormuz as a pressure point against the U.S., President Trump is calling for countries to respond and send warships to help secure the strait and keep it open. He specifically called out China, Britain, France, Japan, South Korea, and the U.K., where the prime minister's office there says he and President Trump spoke this evening about the ongoing situation in the Middle East. No confirmation on if they are sending ships. Now, we did reach out to the White House for more. In the meantime, Democrats are calling this war a war of choice, with no coherent strategy or end, pointing to the rising gas prices. The administration continues to push the message that the impacts are temporary and prices will drop once it's over. One Texas Republican congressman says the long-term impact from the conflict will be beneficial.
I think when the military objective is done, you're going to see the price of gas go way down. I think, again, controlling Kong Island, controlling Venezuela and the oil energy exports there. Long term, we're going to have more control over energy in this world than we did before the invasion of Iran.
And Joey, looking ahead to the president's schedule, he will leave Florida, head back to D.C. tonight, where this week he plans to host Japan's prime minister. Now, these are one of the countries that the president claims benefits from the Strait of Hormuz. So, of course, we'll have to see what comes out of those meetings.
That's right. Dana Marie McNichol, thank you so much. All right, now let's check in with Fox News senior correspondent Mike Tobin. He's live in Tel Aviv, Israel. Mike, what you got?
And, Joey, the rocket and missile fire into Israel is constant all day and all night. The missiles come in from Iran and from the south of Lebanon. The routine of people or the drill of people getting alerts on their phones, then heading into the bomb shelters has become almost routine. The most effective weapon, the more common weapon that Iran is firing now are the cluster bombs that release dozens of little bomblets. Those bomblets get through the Israeli air defenses. And we've got this video now of one of the bomblets making contact in central Tel Aviv. And if you look close at that video, you can see one individual who didn't make it into the bomb shelters. I'm glad to report that he is only lightly wounded. Now, Iran is challenged because their missile launchers are targeted by airstrikes. A former U.S. envoy to Iran agrees with the president's earlier statement that Iran is now having a hard time resupplying stockpiles of weapons to fire at Israel.
Their ability, to shoot missiles and drones is declining. The president's right about that. Unfortunately, it's declining from a very high number.
Israeli intelligence has now provided additional detail about the Hezbollah connection to the synagogue attack just outside Detroit. Ibrahim Mohammed Ghazali was killed a few days ago by an Israeli airstrike. Israel says he was a commander of a unit that fired missiles into Israel, and he managed weapons for that unit. His brother, Ayman Mohammed Ghazali, is the man police say rammed his car into Temple, Israel, in West Bloomfield Township, just outside of Detroit. He had been caught on security video prior to the attack, purchasing $2,000 worth worth of fireworks. The fireworks were found inside his burned car. The only person injured in that attack was Ghazali. He shot himself in the head. Joey?
Mike Tobin in Tel Aviv, Israel. Stay safe, brother. Thank you for the update.
Got it.
The conflict with Iran is causing oil prices to spike, with the price per barrel inching towards $100. Crude oil futures markets open again at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. We'll monitor the developments. Meanwhile, today, Energy Secretary Chris Wright sounded optimistic that the conflict in Iran won't drag on for months.
I think that this conflict will certainly come to the end in the next few weeks. Could be sooner than that, but the conflict will come to the end in the next few weeks, and we'll see a rebound in supplies and a pushing down of prices after that.
Yeah, Secretary Wright also highlighted the importance of America's energy independence during this tumultuous time, while cautioning that there will be some temporary pain at the pump.
Many contingency plans were taken. Of course, the broader Trump agenda of having America become the dominant producer of oil and natural gas in the world and continuing to grow our capacity. So not only to mute the impacts of these interruptions right now, but to lead to a future where America is energy strong, energy dominant, Americans have lower energy prices, and America can help supply energy to an increasing number of our allies around the world.
But
yes,
Mr. Secretary,
we're going to have disruption, and we do have disruption.
Tommy, I think when the Energy Secretary is on, a weekly news show talking about how this is going to be weeks, not months, he's probably speaking to the market. I mean, that's probably the audience he wants to speak to. He's probably trying to drive some of the speculation, bring the market back. I don't think we really know how much longer this is going to last.
Right. Well, it's comforting to hear weeks, not months, right? Yeah. But I think the American people right now, they're just yearning for whatever amount of certainty they can be given. There's no guarantees. As we know, war is unpredictable. This could last a few more weeks. It could be a month. It could be 2 months. But the uncertainty is the problem here. And for many Americans going into the summer season, we know gas prices always go up as you approach the summer months. Yeah. So they want to know how can they plan accordingly. And as we know, gas prices impact everything. They impact the price of travel. They impact your goods. They impact really anything that's transported anywhere is impacted by the price of oil and fossil fuels, all those things. That's why getting the United States more energy independent is so important and has been so important to this president. Nobody likes gas prices going up, but at least you have a president that has a plan and has had a plan to make us less dependent on these foreign suppliers. So I appreciate that, but we need as much clarity as possible so people can plan around it.
Yeah, I do believe, just from the military perspective and the things they've said, I do believe they had a plan. I do believe they're executing it, and I believe that it's coming to fruition the way they want it to, even better. The Strait of Hormuz is kind of that part of it that, how did they plan for it? What did they plan for it? Just knowing how the countermeasure mine operations work kind of a little bit more in detail myself, and knowing where those assets are and they're on the way makes me wonder how well they plan for the Strait of Hormuz actually being mined, or if they're even concerned about it. But the comment from President Trump in that, I believe it was an NBC interview, is, I just want to list off the countries. He said China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the UK. He says, and others. In other words, he's saying, hey, this affects you. You got to be part of the fight. Maybe that was the plan, and say, we're not going to just take all the risk. Bring it on over if you care.
We and the Israelis have done virtually all of the heavy lifting, while Iran is firing off at its various neighbors. This impacts the entire world in terms of oil supply. We actually talked about this very briefly on the show here yesterday. Might the president challenge the rest of the world to get involved, at least on the Strait of Hormuz? And that is exactly what happened here today. Just hours ago, there was a joint statement put out by the Brits, which is interesting because they've been squirrely under the Starmer government on all of this. But the UK plus those Arab states jointly putting out a statement saying, pretty aggressively, we have the right to defend international shipping. They name the Strait of Hormuz. So maybe that's an indication of laying a predicate to do exactly what we were talking about. The other thing I'll quickly mention is the Institute for the Study of War, which is led by our colleague, General Jack Keane. They put out, I think, a very detailed sort of synopsis so far, an analysis of how the war effort or the operation is going. And it was overall very upbeat and was really slapping down some of the doomsaying with people in the press and the Democratic Party saying, oh, this is a disaster. They're like, no, let's actually look at what's happened. It is anything but uncertain, It's still unfolding, but I think we should be accentuating a lot more of the positive that's been achieved than collectively we are so far.
You know, Anita, he invoked the Institute of Study of War synopsis, the analysis. That's General Jack Keane. I saw him on earlier, I believe it was earlier today or yesterday, and he said basically that the oil markets and the Strait of Hormuz are secondary to the military operations, and the military operations will take however long they need to be successful, and then they'll worry about the Strait, then they'll worry about kind of this tertiary effect here at home. I understand that. That's a general speaking, but regular everyday Americans, they might want that almost in the opposite direction.
Yeah, well, exactly. And to Tommy's point, right, Americans hate uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty right now. But I think interesting in that assessment that Guy mentioned by the Institute of the Study of War, it mentioned we're very early into this operation. I think we're just past the 2-week mark here. So let's have respect for our men and women in uniform. Let them do their job. Let's let things unfold. We've already degraded, downgraded the Iranian military to a considerable degree. Their ballistic missile capability, their navy. We've done a lot of damage there. World War II wasn't won in 2 weeks. Let's just give this a little bit of a chance. But you're right, Joey. The American public wants to know what's happening. And maybe, as we said yesterday, the White House should do a little bit better of a job communicating to the American public some of the positives that are going on in this war.
Tommy, I'll go back to Chris Wright. He's, I guess, the latest person to speak for the administration on this from an economic point of view and an energy point of view. He tried to highlight the fact that we've ramped up our energy production, but the price of the gallon is going up. The price of the pump's going up, and it's actually latent from crude oil. So the higher crude oil ratchets up, the more we'll see it at the pump later on. It's a little bit of a slinky. Do you think Americans are forgiving enough that if this war is over in 2 weeks, but the gas spike lasts for 2 more months going into the summer?
Here's what I think needs to happen. I'm not saying that the administration hasn't done this, because I think they have. I think it just is worth reminding people as often as you possibly can to lay out the objective here, saying there's going to be some short-term pain followed by maybe some long-term pain, but when that is over, things are going to be significantly better. So hang on and then watch, as not only are we more safe and secure, not only is the Middle East in a better spot, but this might have long-term implications that are going to be far greater than the pain that you're feeling right now. And as many times as they can emphasize that, I think the American people will be happy with that, or happier with that discussion. It has to be a discussion with the American people.
Yeah, I think communication is the key for the American public, for sure.
Absolutely. Guy, last thing, several Democrats from different places, even within the Biden administration, I'd say Admiral Kirby is probably the most high profile, have essentially come out and said, you may not agree with when we started it, you may not even agree with why we started it, but we're in the middle of it. You should probably support it right now and then, critique on the back end.
Especially based on the point that Senator Fetterman made with us on the program last evening. Presidents from both parties have said repeatedly for decades that it is the official policy of the United States that Iran's crazy theocratic regime never be allowed to get nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Now we have a president who is really enforcing the red line that everyone has drawn. And so it should be bipartisan in support of that objective.
Should's a big word, Guy, especially in politics.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.